So I thought this would be a pretty fun video to do, talk about some of the stuff that we're looking forward to, both in the upcoming mini set that's supposedly releasing in December, and then also the big major set rivaling the size of Genetic Apex in January. Lots to talk about, so let's get right into it. First of all, let's talk about the cinematic cards. I think we will get at least one cinematic card for the upcoming mini set that's going to be in December. And then I think we will get 3 cinematic cards, just like we got in Genetic Apex in the first major set coming in January. So at least 4 new cinematic cards in the next 2 months, which I think is pretty exciting. As for which cards will be cinematic and which won't, obviously it's anyone's guess. I don't know what the theme of the mini set's going to be. I'm pretty convinced that the theme of set 1 is going to be Generation 2. We have a Pokemon from every single generation besides Generation 9 in Pokemon Pocket and Generation 2. I assume we don't have one from Generation 9 because the core set of Genetic Apex was probably designed before Generation 9 came out. And Generation 2, I think, was explicitly just left out of the game because they want Generation 2 to be the theme of the first major set, which I think would make perfect sense. Going off of that theory, I do think we'll get a starter Pokemon as one of the cinematic cards. I'm not really sure which. Most likely it'll be Typhlosion, I think. They might not want to do Typhlosion right after doing Charizard because it's 2 fire Pokemon in a row, so maybe they'll do Feraligatr. From what I understand, my favorite starter from Generation 2 is unfortunately the least popular Generation 2 starter, which is Chikorita, so I would love to see a cinematic Meganium, but I'm not holding my breath. I assume a Tyranitar would be a cinematic card just because people are huge Tyranitar fans. It's like a new typing to put on. Lugia or Ho-Oh are probably up there for cards that could receive cinematic cards. I suspect that the Legendary Trio won't receive any cinematic cards, similar to what we got with the Legendary Trio in Genetic Apex. I think the Legendary Trio will just kind of be spread out amongst the packs and not really be the face of those packs. So, you know, let's say Typhlosion is one of the packs. I assume that Entei will be in the Typhlosion pack or whatever. Because if you put any of the Legendary Trio on a pack, they kind of all have to be the face of the pack, which is kind of the problem, which I assume they probably don't want to do that. I do think we'll get another hidden legendary mission like we got with Mew, where you had to collect all of the Kanto Pokemon to unlock Mew. I expect us to have to catch all of the, I say catch, but open up all of the Johto Pokemon to be able to collect Celebi. I think that just is too fitting and too perfect to not include. So I assume Celebi will actually also get a cinematic card. We kind of moved off of the cinematic discussion there, but the Mythic Pokemon discussion kind of bled into it a little bit. We'll be getting baby Pokemon for the first time, right? Assuming they're fully adapting Generation 2. So I'm curious to see what they do with baby Pokemon. Like, how is Pichu going to work? Can Pichu... I assume Pichu doesn't, like, evolve into Pikachu. But yeah, I don't know how they'll handle that. Obviously, they've done this at some point during the Pokemon trading card game. I'm not sure how they handled it with the Pokemon trading card game. And there's also a chance they'll just handle it completely differently in Pokemon Pocket because, you know, different designers and it's a whole different game, so they can do whatever they want. Now I kind of want to go through each of the types and talk about things that are missing from those types and things that I kind of want those types to receive as support going forward. First up, we have grass types. I don't really have much to talk about with grass types just because really, I think grass is in a relatively decent spot. They don't have many mid-range options, but they have a big build-around card, which is Venusaur, and Venusaur feels pretty decent. Maybe not like the best Pokemon in the world, but still pretty fun. My only request is that we get a good Meganium. Obviously, I'm a big Chikorita fan, so I would love to see a good Meganium. I don't need a cinematic Meganium or anything like that, you know, that's not up there for my hopes because I just don't expect it to happen. But yes, I really do want a good Meganium. Fire Pokemon are up next, and honestly, I don't have much to hope for among Fire-type Pokemon. If we assume Set 2 or the upcoming mini set is indeed focused on Generation 2, then we have 3 major Fire types that will likely all be EX Pokemon, so Fire should be getting plenty of love between Entei, Ho-Oh, and Typhlosion. So honestly, I have no notes. Whatever they come up with, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of exciting stuff coming for Fire between those 3 Pokemon. You know, one of them is going to be really fun. Maybe because we know that Burned is coming, they'll do something cool with Entei, Ho-Oh, and Typhlosion surrounding Burn, or at least one of them maybe. Who knows? Water Pokemon actually already have a ton of minor identities. They have excess energy, they have bench damage, they even have a small disruption theme. Any new water Pokemon has a little bit of an extra flair because it can be targeted by Misty where other cards cannot. So with that said, while we're discussing Generation 2, I would love to see Kindra, especially because sadly, Seadra in game right now only has 70 HP and he could use a little bit of love. So maybe Kingdra can come along and give Seadra a little bit of a push. For Lightning Pokemon, I do assume that we're going to get like a big EX Raikou. So maybe the Pikachu decks end up looking a little bit different. Maybe they start slotting out cards like Pinkerchin, which are kind of just there as a tech slot anyway. and they just slot in Raikou. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what Raikou does, but assuming it can exist in that deck, you'd probably rather run Raikou over some of the basic Pokemon basic non-EX Pokemon you're currently running. So Raikou honestly has like a low bar. Very curious to see how Raikou turns out. On top of Raikou, which seems like the obvious thing that's, the obvious big new flashy thing that Lightning will get, I do really want to see a good Ampharos. I've always liked Ampharos's design, but if we know anything about Pokemon Pocket, it's that Stage 2 Pokemon have a huge hill to climb before they can start being good. It's just really hard to get a Stage 2 Pokemon online, so I do have my fingers crossed that an EX Ampharos is really good so that we can actually play Ampharos. Maybe it doesn't even need to be EX, I'm not holding my breath for EX, but as for Psychic Pokemon, I do have a major request. I'm really, really hopeful for this. If we do get this, I'm more expecting it to be in the mini set than whatever our next expansion is going to be called, but I want an EX Mew so badly. Obviously, the Mew that we have in game right now is super cute, super fun, but it's just a collectible thing, right? No one's ever going to use Mew in a competitive Pokemon Pocket deck unless they print some crazy support for it. That Mew is just there to be fun and to be looked at. And that would be a shame if that was our only representation for Mew, which is such an iconic Pokemon in Pokemon history. I do think that the upcoming mini set is a great chance for us to get a widely distributed version of Mew, and more importantly, and hopefully, a Mew EX. But I'll take just a regular Mew that has some competitive viability compared to the current Mew we have in game. It doesn't need to be anything crazy, I don't need Mew to be a meta deck. I just want a Mew to see some play, man. So moving on to fighting Pokemon, I don't really know what I want from fighting Pokemon right now. The color itself doesn't particularly have a clear identity. Oh, actually, you know what? I just came up with something while I was recording. I would love to see Graveler get a reprint, or alternative art that just gives him a new effect or something like that, because Graveler himself is holding back the Geodude line so much. Having him break the curve, because Geodude is a 1 cost, and then Graveler is a 3 cost, and then Golem is a 4 cost, it's just so awkward. Going from 1 to 3 to 4, and he can't be targeted by Brock, so he can't correct for that. Like, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if Brock could target Graveler. That way you could make up for the off-curve thing that happens, jumping from 1 to 3. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if you could correct for it with Brock, but Brock can only target Golem. So you would expect the jump to go to 1 cost to 2 cost, then to 4 cost so that you can correct with Brock. But Graveler just has to play off-curve, and usually that means evolving a Geodude to be able to protect his health, and then he takes another hit and he just gets KO'd when we weren't able to attack with the Graveler because we're an energy behind. It's just so unfortunate. So yeah, I'd really like to see a Graveler reprint. I don't know how high that would be up on their terms of priority, or whether we will get any reprints at all inside of the upcoming mini set or set 2. But I would love to see a reprint of Graveler that lets him be a bit better and help that Geodude line along, because quite frankly, Golem's not even that bad. It's just Graveler holds back Geodude quite a bit. Oh, also, a good Donphan would be pretty cool. Donphan is, of course, he would be a fighting type in Pokemon Pocket, and I just love this little guy. He's so cute. For Dark types, I'm just going to cut right to the chase. It's all about Tyranitar. Everyone wants a Tyranitar. Dark types don't currently have an EX Pokemon, so I don't see a better chance for them to get an EX Pokemon in a Generation 2 set than Tyranitar. Tyranitar is an extremely popular Pokemon, primed to be the first EX Pokemon, at least the first EX Pokemon that Dark types get, and I fully expect this to be a reality. Like, this is less of like a wish list right now and more of just like a prediction. I do fully expect Tyranitar to be a major part of set 2, and I think he will be the first Dark type EX. Metal is in a really, really bad place right now. Metal is really their only card to build around. Mawile is really, really hurt if they go second. Bishop is like okay, I guess, but it's just a worse version of Voltorb, and they have a similar issue to Dark types, and it's only heightened by the fact that they have such a low card count. But hopefully the solution is the same. A popular Steel type comes along and gets an EX card to let you build a whole new archetype around that specific card, and more importantly, giving Metal some room to shine. Really, we only have 2 candidates for this role in Generation 2 at least. Steelix, which I think is a bit weird because of Onyx. I don't really know how they're going to handle that. What do? They make Steelix a steel type that requires steel energy, or I should say metal energy, but he starts with a fighting type Pokemon. I don't know how they handle that or how they will handle that going forward, but what I think is the better candidate, in my opinion, and I think he's probably a more popular Pokemon as well, is Scizor. I've always liked Scizor's design. I typically don't usually like the humanoid Pokemon designs as much as like a typical Pokemon design, but Scizor hits different. I feel like a big basic Pokemon is exactly what Metal needs right now. More specifically, a big basic EX Pokemon would be perfect, and Scizor being as popular as he is cues him up perfectly to be that candidate. I would love to see some new Dragon types in set 2 and the upcoming mini set, but honestly, I'm not holding my breath. I don't really have much expectation for a new dragon Pokemon anytime soon, but I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. There's not really a clear dragon type candidate lined up, unless maybe they want to put Lugia in the dragon type category, which would be weird because it's a psychic Pokemon. And we'll talk more about that in here briefly. Dragonite is currently the only dragon we have in game, and he's very much his own thing because Dragon's gimmick is multicolor. There isn't as much of a reason to have a large number of dragons in the game because it's relatively inconsequential to their gameplay style. Dragonite decks can always be like water lightning decks, or in a lot of cases, I guess they're just Dragonite decks with sleep tech. So yeah, Dragon's just in a really unique position. I wouldn't say they're in a bad position. It's just Dragonite right now, which is fine because of the way that Dragon's designed. They don't need a lot of Dragon Pokemon, although it would be really cool if one day we do get to play like a full Dragon deck. We're probably just a while away from that. One scary thing to think about for colorless Pokemon is Lugia. Lugia is typically printed as a colorless Pokemon despite its psychic flying type in the video games. If Lugia is printed as a colorless card, it would be the very first big basic Pokemon that is colorless. Assuming for a moment that Lugia is a good card, it would be the first big basic Pokemon accessible to any color without restrictions. I really hope that Lugia's design leans him in a specific direction for deck building, or else we might fall into a scenario where a lot of decks are just running whatever they would want to be running in their deck, and then just 1 or 2 copies of Lugia, despite whatever the heck the rest of their deck looks like, just because if Lugia is, let's say Lugia is like a colorless version of Articuno, for example. Let's say Articuno is not in the game, and there was just a colorless Articuno. That's scary, because every deck would be running it. So yes, they need to be very careful with whatever the heck Lugia is doing. Alright, I think that roughly wraps up everything I wanted to cover in this video. I was going to go over some trainers that I would like to see and things that I would like them to do, but I think the identity of what trainers are doing so closely ties to whatever else they're printing in the upcoming set, and I didn't want to have to like retroactively, or I guess not retroactively, I didn't want to reverse engineer any archetypes that they might be designing ahead of time. I'm happy to see what they come up with. So yeah, let me know what you're looking forward to in the upcoming mini set and set 2. Thank you so much for watching, keep being awesome, and I'll catch you in the next one.